Aloha, I'm Becky, the Executive Director at HIFF. It is my absolute pleasure tonight to welcome you all to this incredible panel that we have. It's truly a breathtaking panel tonight. Before we begin, I want to thank everyone that has participated in our HIFF Talk series. This is the last of our live HIFF Talks panel series. We saved the best for last. Specifically, this program tonight is in partnership with the Ulu'ulu. Ulu'ulu is Hawaii's official state archive for moving images. Located on the University of Hawaii West Oahu campus, the archive is dedicated to the care, preservation, and digitization of film and videotape related to the history and culture of Hawaii. Every year, HIFF partners with Ulu'ulu and to host an incredible film and panel. We could not be more thrilled for the presentation we have this year. Special thanks to everyone that works with Ulu'ulu, especially Heather Juni. I know you're watching somewhere. Thank you so much for everything you do with HIFF every year and for helping us put together this incredible presentation of films and this talk tonight. This panel tonight is in conjunction with our series that we have showcased on the HIFF Streaming Festival, which is viewable online or through one of our apps through the end of November. This series features 5 films, 4 beautiful archival films and a new one called He Wa'a He Honua that pays tribute to the sweeping cultural renaissance that began in the 1970s and will continue with the environmental revitalization led by Hokuleia and her upcoming 44-month circumnavigation of the Pacific. Tonight, we really encourage you to participate as much as you can in the discussion. It's very easy to do so. All you have to do is put your comments, thoughts, questions in the Q&A box if you're watching on Zoom, or if you're viewing on Facebook Live, you can pop it in there and we will have people that can bring it over here. We can't promise we'll get to everything because we know this will be a lively discussion tonight, but we are monitoring all of your thoughts and comments and questions in the Q&A. Leading our panel tonight is Elisa Yadao. She has a long and rich association with the Polynesian Voyaging Society. Elisa currently serves as a volunteer, but is also a former executive director and sailed aboard Hokuleia in 1987 as part of the Voyage of Rediscovery. Her career in media and communications spans 4 decades and includes work as a journalist and communications executive in government, politics, and healthcare. Elisa, it is my pleasure to welcome you to host tonight's panel.
Thank you, Becky, and thank you to all our friends at HIFF. We have a lot of great people on the panel tonight, so I'm just going to get right to it. We are all here this evening to support the Polynesian Voyaging Society, the legacy of Hokuleia, and the upcoming Pacific Voyage. But before I introduce you to our panelists, I'd like to mahalo the Hawaii International Film Festival and Ulu'ulu for making tonight possible, both the panel and the streaming of the films. If you haven't seen He Wa'a He Honua yet, I hope you are encouraged by tonight's conversation to go have a look. This is all part of our membership drive for PVS, so if you are at all inspired and excited by what you see and hear tonight, please go to hokuleia.com and become a member. And now to our panel. We have leaders of Hawaii's Renaissance that began in the late 60s and early 70s, and a new generation of leaders at the forefront of the Renaissance of island Earth, inspired by Hawaii's past and the teachings and learnings of Hokuleia. Governor John Waihee III served as the 4th governor of our state from 1986 through 1994. He was the first and remains the only Native Hawaiian elected as governor of the state of Hawaii. His first elected office was as a delegate to the 1978 Constitutional Convention, which brought statewide changes based on Hawaiian and Hawaii values. He remains tremendously active in community and civic matters today. The revitalization of Hawaiian language is thanks in large part to Larry Lindsay Kimura, one of the founders of the Aha Punana Leo, a Hawaiian language immersion preschool program started in 1983. Larry has been a Hawaiian language and culture instructor at the University of Hawaii system for 49 years, and that important work continues today at the College of Hawaiian Language at UH Hilo. The health of the land is the health of our people, is a belief that has guided Dr. Noah Emmett Aluli throughout most of his life. A founder of the Protect Kaho'olawe Ohana, Emmett was one of the very first to set foot on Kaho'olawe in the movement to stop the bombing of the island by the United States Navy. Emmett has a family practice on Molokai and continues his work with the Ohana, focusing on Iola Kanaloa, bringing life to Kaho'olawe. Walter Riddy is also a founder of the Protect Kaho'olawe Ohana. Born and raised on Molokai, he has been fighting for social, cultural, and environmental justice and the protection of Hawaiian rights for more than 40 years. A master fish pond practitioner, champion of food sovereignty, and active in the anti-GMO and pesticide movements, Walter is executive director of Aina Momona, a Native Hawaiian nonprofit based on environmental health and sustainability. Nainoa Thompson is president of the Polynesian Voyaging Society and has the high distinction of Po Navigator, an honor given to him by his teacher Maupi Ailug. Nainoa has led all of Hokulea's voyages since 1980 and is now focused on the next voyage, Moana Nui Akea, a physical 41,042-month circumnavigation of the Pacific by Hokulea and Hiki Analia, and a virtual voyage for millions of others interested in learning to navigate the Earth towards a healthy, thriving future. Bruce Blankenfeld is also a Po navigator and has been with the PVS since 1977. He is a veteran crew member and has sailed more than 100,000 miles through Polynesia, Micronesia, and many destinations in the worldwide voyage. He is vice chair of the PVS Board of Directors. Bruce is a fisherman, canoe paddler, kayaker, and works as a stevedore for McCabe, Hamilton, and Rennie. He and his wife, Lita, live in Niu Valley with their family. Pomai Bertelman is one of the Voyaging Society's leading female captains and was part of an extraordinary team that brought Hokulea home at the end of the worldwide voyage. She was raised on the island of Hawaii and comes from a family of voyagers who have been part of the Ohana Va'a since the very beginning. Since 1995, Pomai has sailed multiple deep-sea voyages on Makali'i, Hokulea, and the Alingano Maisu. Pomai is also a middle school instructor at Kanuoka Aina Charter School. Ka'iulani Murphy is one of a growing number of female navigators in the Voyaging Society. Also born and raised on the Big Island in Waimea and Waipio Valley, she has been a crew member since 1998. She was Hokulea's navigator on the team of Next Generation Voyagers who returned Hokulea home after the worldwide voyage. Ka'iu is an assistant professor at Honolulu Community College, where she teaches Hawaiian astronomy, navigation, and voyaging. And rounding out our panel is Denise Espana, head of school at the Malama Honua Charter School in Waimanalo on Oahu. Here's the school self-description. Inspired by the worldwide voyage of Hokulea and Hiki Analia in 2014, we are now an award-winning project-based learning center dedicated to developing the mindset of the navigator. Denise is a gifted educator and administrator with experience from preschool to post-secondary education, and she will play a pivotal role in the education and cultivation of new navigators who lead the Renaissance of tomorrow. And now to our panel. Governor, I'd like to start with you. One of the reasons we're showcasing Renaissance movements from the 70s and the 80s is for the lessons that we can rely on as we come out of the pandemic and also as we confront really tremendous environmental challenges. What can we learn, and how did you navigate the challenges that you faced in the 1970s?
Well, aloha everybody. Thank you for the invitation. And I wanted to assure the audience that these questions were not pre-reviewed by any of us. So So let's begin. I mean, what we call the Hawaiian Renaissance, or the Renaissance from which all of these activities came from, was really more than just one little incident. It actually grew out of a number of things. And I think that to understand some of this, you need to know that, in a way, there was a kind of a renaissance going on in Hawaii before the Renaissance that we now relate to as Hawaii. I mean, we had the 442nd coming back from the war. They had established themselves. There was a political renaissance. In a way, they were so determined not to be considered second-class Americans that maybe they were pushing so hard to become American that all of a sudden there was some resistance going on, some idea that maybe there was more to what should be happening to Hawaii than just the best achievement of social economic objectives. And for example, at the University of Hawaii, young people were starting to question why was the use of lands in Hawaii? It was being developed all over the place, and there was a kind of a resistance to this. Hawaii needed to be something more than that. There was the Vietnam War going on. All of these things come together sometime around about 1970, and people are questioning the direction of Hawaii. And where are we going? And you begin to see resistance occurring to some of the policies that government was pursuing in the state at that time. People went out and Kokua Hawaii was formed. And the idea was that we need to stop the eviction of farmers from Kalama Valley, which is now a completely settled subdivision. We need to, we need to think about how we use water in Waiole Waikani, and whether the diversion of water from farmers to go and grow cane on the other side of the island was the thing to be done. And this was not only Hawaiian. I mean, people were going to Ota Camp to see why were plantation workers being evicted. Young people were going out to Chinatown and stopping the evictions. But all of these things didn't have any kind of rhyme or reason unless there was some value system attached to it. So the value system that people relied on to present a different point of view from what was happening and the normal course of events in Hawaii were based on Hawaiian concepts. And they had to be learned because most people didn't know what Hawaiian concepts were. Our parents didn't want to teach us Hawaiian. They were punished for speaking it, but all of these kinds of situations. So many people went out and made relationships with the kupuna, who started to talk to us about the idea of conservation, of being something, of treating the island and the land as special. And this system of values begins to permeate the discussions of what's happening in Hawaii. And the idea that there might be something special here that we need to know more about. We need to find out more about. So it begins a journey of education. It begins a journey of people trying to learn, I believe, two things. They wanted to learn their sense of place. What was Hawaii and why was it special? And they wanted to learn their identity. And so we begin to see a struggle for teaching our history our own way and the creation of ethnic studies at the University of Hawaii. We begin to see people to talk about their resources and the like. And out of all of this, probably the two foundational pieces of it was the idea that the land was part of us, was very special, that the aloha aina meant something more than just a phrase. And you begin to see something like protect kaho'olawi on one hand. On the other hand, the water that surrounds us connects us. And people begin to discover that. And then the Polynesian Voyaging Society. Obviously, all of this accumulates at the end of the 70s and what we call the Renaissance at the Constitutional Convention. But along the way, you couldn't understand the values that people were talking about without knowing the language, because it was the language that put it all together. And
which
so
leads us right to
the next guy,
who happens to be your cousin.
I got a couple of cousins on this show, actually.
You know, Larry, back when today we hear Hawaiian and it seems so natural and it seems normal, and you hear it in everyday conversation. But before Punana Leo was founded, that wasn't the case, and the language was on the brink of extinction. How did you know what to do?
First of all, aloha to everybody, and what an honor. Yeah, I guess time has gone, you know, we're talking about back in the 70s. And your question really addresses me before that, because growing up in Waimea, a special place to me. I'm sure everybody has a special place where they grew up, but it happened that I still had my mother, who is a speaker of Hawaiian, and of course my grandmother and grand-aunts and uncles. Very much a part of my upbringing, and also on my Japanese side, my father, native speaker of Japanese, and his parents, of course. I didn't get to know my Oji-chan because he passed away a little earlier. Anyway, this is during the territorial days, right? Before I went to Kamehameha in 1959, and that was statehood. So this is the kind of time where, as Governor John was just saying about all these other factors that were happening around us as well. And for me, it was because of the World War II that was very impactful, and the whole mission to become the next 49th state. Of course, we never became the 49th, we became the 50th. And so at home, and many homes, this is a common story, I think, that we were being, how do you say, educated to speak good English, not this kind of pidgin kind talk we're talking nowadays or whatever, but, and of course, definitely not any other language. There was no room for that, except in my growing up, I had to hear it because those were the speakers of the language. And that, of course, brought to my mind very early, way before I entered, well, I'll get to the Kamehameha story a little later, but I was just wondering, how come, you know, we have to be so on top of this American dream and all of that, which is great. But what about right here in my household? What's so wrong about that? And, you know, a lot of my younger students, not nowadays, but much earlier, would say, what about the Hawaiian youth at the time? And I would say in the 50s and 60s, Hawaiian youth were not very proud to say that they're Hawaiian because just the way they were being brought up. Unfortunately, but I won't go into all of that, but these are kinds of elements, I guess you could say, that affects a person, and it certainly affected me. And I went to Waimea Elementary Intermediate, and that's how I got to know a little bit more about your mama, Governor John, who was one of my teachers. But anyway, we're Ohana too. It's a small community. Anyway, and I thought, wow, I'm going to Kamehameha. It's a Hawaiian school. As it turned out, of course, it's only at that time, preference by ethnicity. But I was so fortunate to be at Kamehameha just when our, at that time, boys' school principal, Colonel Kent, said, he's going to hire this person who never taught Hawaiian in her life, but she's a native speaker, Dorothy Kananui. She came just at my last 3 years, my sophomore, junior, and senior year, and she taught Hawaiian. Happened to have a free period, and I said, I'm going to learn how to speak it, because at home, I heard it, I could understand little words and phrases, I couldn't really speak it. And then pretty soon I started to write home to my grandmother in Hawaiian, and all of a sudden she gets surprised. But that was good, because by the time I got home for Christmas vacation, I could say something to her, and she was kind enough to be kind to me and support that effort. So I was fortunate to hang on to those last kupuna I had in my family, the last grandparents, grandaunts, granduncles, who became my teachers actually after that. So I could get to become more fluent in speaking it. But I already had in me this concern that we needed to do something, because I was looking at people who were of another generation going very quickly. And so when I had the opportunity to, at least talking about Vietnam War, I was luckily to be stationed in Germany and not in Vietnam during the 60s. And then when I got out, thank goodness that Dr. Albert offered me a job at Manoa, started teaching. And I used to take these tape recordings that I did earlier when I was just a student, fooling around with this technology, tape recorder. And my students, some of them would say, how come you're bringing these? Why don't you, at that time, KCCN radio was playing, I think 24 hours Hawaiian music. Hawaiian music was the sound of the so-called Renaissance that we know now, because back then nobody said Renaissance, as Governor John was saying. We were just doing what we were doing. And Hawaiian music was taking off. But the radio station, why don't you go and talk to these kupuna on the air? And that's what happened. So we started our radio show in 1972, and I conducted that program for 16 years until 1988. So we were very fortunate to have that documentation of over 550 hours of these interviews that I had conducted among the last of our native speakers of the Hawaiian language. At that time, we were thinking less than 2,000. Today, we say 405 outside of fluent speakers, because I know a lot of people can say, Behe oi maika no wau, but fluent speakers outside of the little population that has been inundated, the population of Ni'ihau being inundated in mainstream right now, mainly on the island of Kauai. So just to make that as succinct as possible, that's how we realized. When I say we, I got to influence a handful of students to say, look, we got to get our language back to the babies. We cannot be teaching just you guys here in high school and in college. So this is where we began to, and at that time, we were talking to our Maori scholar who was earning his master's and PhD in linguistics, Tamati Ridi, and also Sergio Rapo from the island of Rapa Nui. These were very similar, same concerns, and we would go by hours and hours and hours saying the same thing. Look, the only way is we got to get to those babies at home and begin. And so that other evening, we showed Heather had documented Pila Wilson and his wife Kawanoi were the first couple to bring up their two children in Hawaiian from parents who had to learn Hawaiian in order to be fluent enough to speak it. And that's what's happening currently in bringing the numbers back for our speakers that most of us are hearing now, because we don't get to hear our tutus and kupuna except on recordings. But the language at that time, as we recognized, was, of course, not only Hawaiian, but it's fundamental to a people. language is fundamental to humankind, and why can't Hawaiian have their own language as well, which we did. I mean, we do have. So this is where language we recognize as very, very powerful, although it's one of the first things that goes from a people. And people don't realize, because we're eating poi, we're doing the hula and everything else, but nobody noticed about language. But that is a critical, of course, I'm a little biased, but critical element of any people.
Thank you for that. You know, land, as Governor mentioned, land is important to a people as well. And we think about it now, and just even the thought of bombs falling on land here in Hawaii is incomprehensible. But for you, Emmett, and you, Walter, that's what you confronted. And if we can start with you, Emmett, what motivated you to do what you did?
Hi, aloha mai kaua, lono I ka makahiki.
Lono I ka makahiki.
We are on to Ko'olawe to do our ceremonies, 40 years ongoing. Something that Auntie Edith Kanakaʻoli told us we had to do when we kind of like were working on our consent decree, which allowed us to give access to Ko'olawe. Bring the makahiki back into our lives. So we called Lono, we asked him to bring his winds, to bring the clouds, to bring the rain, to drop on the island, to raise the water table, something George Helm had been working on before he disappeared. Learned very early on something that Nalani Kanakaʻoli had given to us, that the land is the religion. Without the land, we are nothing. And so what's motivated me, I was in the very first graduating class of the John A. Burns School of Medicine in 1975. It started in 1969. And as Governor Waihee was saying, everything was going on. And so here we had to kind of look at how, as medical students, and there was only 4 of us Hawaiians in that class, how we're going to do the bicultural kind of like transition. Us being Hawaiians, us having to kind of understand the medical science, us having to be committed to kind of like care for our communities, our families, and how we're going to kind of make that transition, especially when the kupuna, our kupuna, were practitioners of la'au lapa'au and la'au kahea. And so we brought them back into our lives to learn all this, yeah. And so it was difficult, but we were able to make that transition. I was a surgical resident at Queens Medical Center when we occupied Ko'olawe. And so I had all this explanation to do. And the reason why we went to Ko'olawe, so that when we went to trial, we had to kind of like stand the kind of like chance of being convicted and a felony in kind of like having to kind of like lose your opportunity to continue to practice if you were found guilty. So all that kind of really pushed me to kind of move forward. After George Helm died, it was really a commitment that the generation that continued the work would actually be able to kind of like make a plan to end the bombing and do it politically, and by being able to, in our consent decree, to gain more access to Ko'olawe, develop numbers, especially the kupuna, who kind of like were able to kind of like show that this was a reason why Pat Saiki would be able to kind of like get to President Bush to end the bombing, like the 1953 executive order by Eisenhower was able to kind of like give the island to Kaho'olawe. So that was all the things that we learned. Anyway, for us going forward, it's kind of like bringing life back to Kaho'olawe, which is really motivating us because we kind of like really need to kind of like take care of the island, Iola Kanaloa, bringing life and a setting so people can continue to learn about what Kaho'olawe is all about. Kaho'olawe's original name was Kanaloa. Before that was Kohe Malama Lama o Kanaloa. And the island is just the tip of Kanaloa. When you look at how deep it goes into the ocean floor, Kanaloa, the Polynesian god of the ocean, extends throughout the Pacific. And so bringing the practices and honoring Kanaloa is part of the things that we continue to do as we uplift and bring life to Kanaloa Kaho'olawe. And so that's kind of things that motivated me and the generations that have continued the work. You start something, you finish it, ukupao, they call it, so that's kind of the things that has motivated me. And especially because, George Helm, Kimo Mitchell gave their lives for us to be successful, and we honored that. And briefly said, things like what we kind of like look at is oi'ola vai honua, the superior health, our spirit for the water and for the earth. How do we kind of like look at that in light of bringing health, especially these times, to our families, to ourselves, to our communities. And so that's the flow of what Kaho'olawe has meant to me, Kanaloa especially. Mahalo.
Thank you, Emmett. Walter, you have, for all your life, it seems, been a part of championing Native rights, access to land, all of these things, and starting with Kaho'olawe. Can you talk to us about what motivates you and what keeps you going, and how we bring that forward to today?
Yeah, aloha everybody. Aloha kako. Actually, the motivation part, I wanted to try and figure out how to get a message to people that great things happen not because you sit down and have a meeting or go to a Zoom meeting or whatever. It sort of has a life of its own, and you never know when something is going to happen that's going to affect everybody. And sometimes you think you're going to be part of a really great event, and it turned out to be a big flop. So my motivation came because I was a hunter. Early on, I got into a lot of political problems on Molokai, and I couldn't get a job. So I had to feed my family by being a hunter. So I knew nothing about myself as a Hawaiian back then. This is like in 1975. I went to Kamehameha schools, and I graduated not knowing that anything about myself as a Hawaiian. So because I got into so much problems, I got arrested a few times because I was hunting on somebody else's land, and my cousin John Wahe came to the rescue. I don't know, did we win that case or did we lose that case?
We won the case because the Rangers ate the deer, so they had no evidence.
So hunting was a big part of my motivation, and we formed a group called Hui Alaloa because we needed access. We didn't have access to these lands. They kept arresting us because the deer didn't read the signs that said no trespassing. So we followed the deal and we got into a lot of trouble. So Access Hui Alaloa, the first time we organized on Molokai, first time ever that Hawaiians actually got together and took on the government and took on anybody to do something besides dive for quarters when the Lurleen came in. So in 1975, we did a march on Molokai, and we got on television, and we became known all over the state via television that we were like hippies that were making trouble. So because of that, I got a call from Charlie Maxwell. I knew nothing about Kaho'olawe. So it wasn't something that we planned that we was gonna, or I planned to do the rest of my life or so many years trying to figure out how we're gonna stop the bombing of Kaho'olawe. Everything was an accident. So Charlie says, hey, Walter, we need a hunter. I said, shoots, I come. I didn't know any of the issues, so I went. They didn't tell me that we was gonna go on this diesel boat that was going chugga, 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 chugga for 4 hours on the ocean. I got sick as hell. And I wanted to get off that boat. But when we got to Kaho'olawe, all the military came with the helicopters and threatened us and everything. All the boat owners was gonna get confiscated. So Charlie said, hey, turn around, we're going back. Going back, I gotta get off of this boat. You know, I'm gonna be throwing up till I got nothing left. So this other boat came by and there were reporters and they showed us a newspaper, the morning newspaper, Advertiser, I think it was. And in big red letters, it had Kaho'olawe, invasion of Kaho'olawe. So somehow the word leaked out and it was supposed to be all secret kind of stuff. So I said, hey, bro, can you take us to Kaho'olawe? Because they came on their boat. I said, sure, jump on. So 9 of us jumped on. And they was the reporters who took us to Kaho'olawe. So I was so sick, the first thing I wanted to do was head for the bushes. And so I started walking. Everybody else was busting out the canned corned beef and the poi and all that kind of stuff. And then Emmett saw me going out, and so Emmett said, hey, where are you going? I said, oh, no, I'm going to check the place out. So Emmett and I ended up going to the top of the island. So when we turned around and looked back, the boats had come to take these guys off. All the guys who was on the beach grinding. So that started, I don't know, 2 or 3 days escapade that Emmett and I had walking through Kaho'olawe. And what we saw was destruction, 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 destruction. So that put the first amount of anger into me that they were actually destroying my history because we didn't have a written language, right, the Hawaiians. So in order to know what our kupuna was all about, we were relying on archaeology and historic sites and those kinds of things, and they were blowing these things up. So they were blowing away my history. So that was the first thing that got me angry. And then when the helicopters came after 3 days over there and took us off the island, there was something that took over me. And by the time I got to Maui, I was sort of like out of control. Like all I kept hearing in that helicopter was, I am dying. I am dying. That the island was dying and that we had to save that island. So that was the key motivation that changed my whole life, to the point where the judge told me, you cannot go to the island. And I went back to the island and he told me, we got arrested again. He told me, you cannot go back to the island. I went back to the island. We got arrested many, many times. We also occupied the island, Richard and I, for 30 days without food and water. We came out skin and bones. And the only reason we came out was because Senator Inouye and all of our elected officials came to Kaho'olawe, and the military convinced them that Richard and I was not on the island, so they could continue bombing. So we was on the island and we were being bombed. So Richard said, we're gonna die, we're gonna die. And I said, no, we're not gonna die, jump inside this crevice. So there was this lava tube, and we jumped inside the lava tube. And we lived. So our plan was, if somebody is on the island, they cannot bomb the island. So now somebody is on the island and they started bombing the island. So our plan was like, okay, the plan not working, time to get off the island. So we got off the island. I think that we would never have been successful because we knew nothing about ourselves as Hawaiians. We had no University of Hawaii Hawaiian Studies program. All we had was our kupuna. And the kupuna said, kill them with aloha. That was anti-clerical. And we had a hard time understanding that. And then they say, Homa na nui. And I had a hard time understanding that, I said, because it took many, many years for us to accomplish what we tried to accomplish. And the side action that made me feel good about, even though we haven't, while we were trying to stop the bombing, was when we went to the Constitutional Convention and I met up with my cousin again. And my job was to go to every single person and tell them that we need access rights. And we created Article 12, Section 7, so that we can have access rights not only for hunting, but for religious purposes and whatever. And the state had the ability to govern some of that, but they couldn't govern it out of existence. So that was my motivation story. And the crux of the story is that you can never tell when something great is going to happen, but you just keep going. And that's what I'm doing, because I'm worried that even though they're not bombing Oahu, it seems like there's a cancer that's doing the same job as the bombs we're doing on Kaho'olawe that's happening to the rest of our islands. Mahalo.
Thank you for that. So when we put this panel together, we knew that we were going to have so much rich conversation and small amount of time. So I'm going to do my little job here, which is to remind everyone who's watching us that this is a membership drive for the Polynesian Voyaging Society. So if anybody here has inspired you, go to hokulea.com and become a member. Okay, I've done my business part of it. I want to know, and specifically I want to go to the younger members, and Bruce, and I know I will come to you, but Denise and Pomai and Ka'u, you know, as we look to a new voyage and we look to a new renaissance, and this one about our earth, and you sail these canoes and you carry this message from this place, knowing that these are the people who have gone before you. What is your vision, and how do you see yourselves going forward? And I'm gonna come around, Pomai, start with you, and then go to Ko'iu, and then come to you, Denise.
Kia aloha nui a kākou, aloha no. First of all, mahalo nui to everybody who is on this panel and for all of the years of inspiration that you guys have given to us. I think to answer that question, I think about, first of all, I come from a small community that's really growing pretty rapidly. It's very different from when Uncle John was living here with my dad, and Uncle Larry was here as well. But it's growing rapidly, and I know time is short, so I have one image in my mind that I want to share that I think is impressionable. When growing up in this community, it was obvious and evident that similar to Molokai, but not the same. That we had the ability to feed ourselves, that we had the ability to sustain ourselves, and we had the ability to share and provide lako, or to create that basket should anybody need it, that was available to our community. So with the onset of this this time and this season right now on the earth, I was utterly surprised maybe and in shock when I recognized the first time that we had the community give the community meal, and it actually caused a traffic jam in Waimea. And that for me was in 30 plus years, that was a huge arc into something that I never knew before. And it was a juxtaposition to a voyage that we've just done last year, Hanauna, where we were able to provision one canoe for 30 days, 4 meals a day, with food grown, harvested, and raised specifically on Hawaii Moku. And so when I put those images together, what it reminds me of, and as I listen to everybody here who's speaking, what it says to me is that we have a backbone that we need to get, and we need to stay pili to those individuals who, without being maha'oi, but stay pili to those individuals who are within our circles and within our families, and akamaka, and pay attention and recognize the things that they're doing, so that we have the capabilities to continue to step. Same thing, I was definitely taught here that everything that happens to us is a direct result of the community, but more especially Aina. And that when we malama Aina, and not just say, but we truly do that, then there's a major reciprocation that comes back to us, and we're able to sustain ourselves. One of the things that I do think is that going forward for this generation, I guess, as we look towards the future, is to remember that we are islands unto ourselves as individuals, as Kanaka, as people. And that if we keep saying that, so as my example, and Kalamai, I don't mean any disrespect, but as an example is we keep referring to Las Vegas as the 9th island. Well, the image doesn't even fit. It doesn't fit at all. Talking about a continent, and you're talking about people, a body of island, of va'a surrounded by water. So every time we keep thinking that we want to have those things, or we want to be like that, then it takes away from who we truly are here. And the concepts of thinking and understanding are not the same. So for me going forward, I think, and for us going forward, I think part of it is recognizing that we are islands unto ourselves. We are moku unto ourselves. And when we believe that, and when we start to do that again, I definitely know that that's not easy. But when we start to think about that and have that kind of mindset, then we're able to recalibrate and make things different. And I think it's potentially similar to what all of the uncles are talking about and referencing. Not the same, but similar. I also think my dad used to say kamaka, and the way that I translate that in my own, from my front door, is observe, make your assessment, and then create the systems of adaptability so that you can thrive. And so I think going forward, we have a lot of work to do. It's the kuleana though is always going to come back to our strength will always be granted to us if we remember to malama aina first. We remember to take care of aina first, and to remember that it has everything that we need. And even if we don't know all the answers, and as long as we're patient, then it will continue to tell us where we need to go. Mahalo.
Thank you, Pomai. You are a voyager and you are a teacher. And those two things are very important, and ties to the work that Denise is doing. what do you see as your, what is your vision, and what do you see as your kuleana in those two capacities, understanding that you represent these things that we heard this evening, and we have so much in front of us to do.
Yes, absolutely. Aloha, aloha kako. It's first, I would say it's an honor to be amongst heroes here on this panel. So I'll try to be really quick because we still have to hear from everybody. I think the kind of one of my takeaways, I guess, is just, looking at everybody that's here, the revolutionaries, that started this change for better. And from the Va'a, our Olelo, Aloha Aina, starting with Kaho'olawe and how we can carry that on in our own places. It just gives me a lot of hope that we can, make these big changes that we're going to need for the future to be a healthy, safe one for us all to live. And educating, of course, is a big part of, raising that awareness. So yeah, I'm just really, grateful for these folks, leaders of our Renaissance and those early days of the revolutions, and looking forward to, the generations now that are much more aware because of the work that they've done, that you guys have done, so that we've grown up in this time where, we are comfortable, we're proud to be, who we are, where we come from. And yeah, I guess that's my main thing, I think, is just that they give me hope, and seeing the young people that are interested in being involved and care about, the health of our islands and our planet, is also really hopeful that we can do this. Mahalo.
Thank you, Ka'u. Denise, you have a school that is devoted to teaching young people how to navigate. And I'd like you to share that, what you do and how you do it and why you do it, and what you think the place of that is, given everything that we've talked about this evening.
Aloha mai kako. First of all, just super humbled to be just in the same Zoom space with all of you. I think it's I feel like I'm here as just a representative of our haumana and the work that we're doing, and they really are at this time learning from everything that you are accomplished, and I think that's where we start, right? Is we always tell them, what is that ike kupuna that you're bringing with you? So, and today, so I want to start first off is we're going through 8th grade defense right now, and we're asking our haumana in 8th grade and all the way down to kindergarten, how do they live malamahono? What does this mean to them? And today, one of our 8th graders told me, kumo malamahono is not just doing something; it's actually a mindset. It's something that we need to be working towards. It's something that I need to try to accomplish and get better at. And that really, I think, is the role of education in our kuleana as a school, is to develop our next generation of navigators who find strength in the knowledge of their kupuna, their ancestors, who are aware of the successes and challenges facing our communities today, and are really the ethical problem solvers who are confident in advocating for what is pono. And that's because of the foundation that's been laid by all of you on this panel, by the other Native Hawaiian charter schools that came before us, because we are the baby of the Native Hawaiian charter schools. And so for Malamahonoa, we draw on all of this that has been laid as our foundation, as our kahua. And when Robert Witt and Nainoa came together and sat around Auntie Laura's table to create our mission and articulate what we're calling our Mind of the Navigator skills, that's where we find our most immediate foundation as a kula. So Our skills are communication and collaboration, confident cultural identity, environmental awareness, global perspective, ethical problem solving, and civic responsibility. And so for us, whether it's through our 5th or 8th grade defense, our 6th grade sail with Kanehunamoku Voyage Academy, that we want our haumana to actually do the hana, right? Makahana kaike. And we want them to reflect on these many experiences that they have so that they can hopefully take everything and the gifts really that they have because of all that has been sacrificed before them, for them to be able to navigate any educational pathway, any profession, any life choice that they encounter, that they understand that I'm going to prioritize ike kupuna. They're going to take advantage of hands-on projects in their communities so that they can try to not only problem solve in the future, but really try as now from our babies at kindergarten all the way up to say, okay, what is my kuleana as a kindergartner? What is my kuleana as a 7-year-old to malama honua? So just, I think, being able to even have experiences like these and being able to share even this video recording with our haumana is going to be so powerful because they are able to see the faces to the names that they've been reading about and listening about, and realizing that what we're trying to do is take all of this ike and try to help them to empower our haumana to make those next steps, to progress forward, to change that, to get to their accomplishment of that mindset of malama honua, that it's not just to do the work, but it's to actually constantly aspire and to ask questions and to say, okay, what's our next step? What are we going to do better? How are we better? And how are we going to make our lahui stronger by the actions that we engage in? So mahalo nui.
Thank you, Denise. So our friends at the film festival have asked if everybody's willing, because there's so much conversation and not even everybody can get all to talk yet. So if you're willing to hang out for a little bit more, they're going to let us go maybe another 15 minutes if you guys can hang with us. Everyone here knew that that was exactly what was going to happen, so thank you for that. I do want to ask about the upcoming voyage, and we're going to change up a little bit. If you would, Bruce, tell us about the new voyage and why. You know, when Hokulea first sailed, there was not a contemplation that she would sail forever. And it's been many years since that voyage in 76, and she has gone many miles, and she'll go again. So can you tell us what that is, and more importantly, why that is?
Okay. Hey, aloha mai kako. At least I'm going to ramble a little bit, yeah? And I just want to back up to what you said about Hokulea. You know, when Hokulea was built in 1974, and she was built for a 5,000-mile journey to be documented. And at the end of that journey, that was big. I mean, there was no expectations. But as time went on and, you know, over the decades, from a concept of 5,000-mile voyage to document something, she sailed over 200,000 miles. She's had hundreds upon hundreds of crew members from all over the planet at this point in time. You know, she went from Mao, you know, being the first navigator on board that just expanded so much awareness about the possibilities of our ancestors, to Nainoa becoming the first Hawaiian navigator in his trip in 1980, to now we have dozens of navigators, young men and women, throughout the state and the Pacific. It's truly an amazing journey, in that sense. And I just want to say, one of the things that we'd like to keep in the forefront is that, Hokulea, like so many things around us, are ancestral treasures. They're cultural treasures. She's a living treasure. She's a state treasure. She's our, embodiment of something from the past that is so alive today. So regarding this upcoming voyage, gosh, we're in the process of, we took her all apart, which is like such a wonderful thing because, there's like miles and miles of aho, cordage, holding her together so strong, strong enough to go through like incredible seas and go around the world. But we took her all apart, and then now we're in the process of putting her all back together. And we have a lot of young faces down there, a lot of young men and women. And man, it's so refreshing. They're so excited. They're there, as much as they can be. We're getting it done. And I just think that, all the work that's being done is such a gift, not only to them, but then to the others who will come behind. And so this voyage, like from the very beginning, it's all about possibilities. It's all about dreams. It's possibilities. And the possibilities are like wide open. It's only as big as we can dream and we can look forward. And so it's happening. This Pacific Rim is going to be awesome because they're going to tie us together around this common resource, which is, Moana Nui Akea. And where do we take it as far as healing and other perspectives of it? So it's awesome. It's amazing with the young group because, at this point in time, like our generation, I know I myself, we're starting to really take some steps back to the degree that, the generation coming up, which is which is already here, Kailani, Pomai, and the rest of them. And the next generation are coming up with all their enthusiasm and understanding of what's going on is really amazing. It's enriching. So that's where we're at. There's a long journey ahead, but we got a good gang, and so real excited about it.
Thank you, Bruce. Nainoa, can you speak to how the upcoming voyage grew out of and is different from the worldwide voyage? And just for the panelists, we've got extra time. We're going to go maybe to 8:30. And everybody, I just want you all to get ready because I'm going to ask you for closing thoughts before we finish tonight. Now, to you, Nainoa, about the voyages.
Okay. Thank you, Elisa. Aloha mai kako. But permit me to take some of the precious time to, oh man. I was there. I was too young to know anything. I was too young to do anything, but I wasn't too young to be witness to what I know has profoundly changed my life. This is what we call the Renaissance, and the Renaissance is still going. It's not like it was a period in time that faded away. It's growing, and it's more powerful every day. Look at what's happening everywhere in Hawaii, and but there were those that would I see extinction as this black road, and now I see it as a storm. It's a black storm. And then there would be those that would take a tiny flame that they could carry by themselves and they would become heroic, and they would become courageous. They would stand up for so many others that didn't know how to stand up. And that's Emmett, that's Walter, that's the governor, that's Larry. I mean, two that would take on the most powerful military force in the world and say, we're not coming off this island. And you can arrest us at any time. There would be two that would go to Aotearoa to find Kohongareo. And they would go to, and we took Hokulea up there, 62 locks, up the Hudson River, up into Lake Erie, to get to a place in Montreal of a native village called Kawanake to meet the retired nun that would open the first language immersion school for Native people in the world. Larry and them, they went, and they brought her back to testify to the ignorance of our Board of Education directors, to the ignorance of our legislature. Didn't understand the value of what happens if you lose your language. You go down the black road, it gets really slippery, and you go off the cliff. We're right on the edge of extinction. And then, you know, you have a governor that just happened to be not just happened to be at the right time. He made the time. He created the time. He was the force at CONCON that would change laws, that would change education, that would essentially set Hawaii on the path for what is right. So all of these heroes, to me, even though, and I'm acknowledging them and honored to be here more than they'll ever know, is because I was there watching them. As someone that didn't know anything, didn't know what to do. But it shaped my life, and it shaped many people's lives. And so I want to aloha and honor them tonight. It's an honor to be in, at least, maybe not, at least virtually in the same room. And because everything that comes that makes Hawaii so powerful and so extraordinary comes because of those people lighting the flame and carrying it in the black when nobody else was. And then you have to look at, you need to bring in the room Herb Kane and Ben Finney. You got to bring him in the room. You need to bring in Piailug, the greatest navigator on the face of the earth, and aloha them too. And then there's thousands, right? I mean, Denise was talking about the emergence of the Hawaiian-based charter schools. This is the key. We need 1 million schools like the schools in Hawaii around the world. That's why we're going, Elisa. This is different. That when you look at the worldwide voyage, that's not my voyage. That was one of my best friends, Lieutenant Colonel Lacey Veach, second astronaut into space, that said, Naino, you have no idea how beautiful the island Earth is until you see the whole thing from space. And you have no idea that there is no other island in space that allows us to, by the way, breathe, let alone 1,000 other things. And he said, but we're changing it. And this is back in the early 90s. We're changing the Earth. It's going to turn around and change us, and we don't know what to do. And then 1995, just to tell you where the seed of the worldwide voyage came, wasn't from me. It was a promise that he made me promise 6 days before he died of lymphomelanoma. I flew to see him in Houston at NASA, and he said, promise me 3 things. You'll sail Hokulea around the world. You will listen to the new language on the earth, climate change, sustainability, hypoxia, dead zones, the rising tide of drowning islands, melting glaciers on Greenland, and drowning islands in Micronesia. It's all connected. It's all connected to the living systems of Earth, and we're changing it. And then he said, listen to that language, the new language of the Earth. And he said, build a school. Build a school. And I want to say that the school is already constructed. because he, Lacey Veach, the astronaut, was inspired and influenced by the ones on the panel, because he believed that Hawaii was the school. That if you want to solve the energy issues here and alternative, you can be 100%. If you choose to do that, you want to be food sovereignty, we already were. But a Native Hawaiian knowledge, and he went over all this checklist of things that Hawaii can do that the earth doesn't know how to do, and Hawaii needs to become the school. Promise me, and I know you'll build the school. And so it's being constructed every day. So we took 13 years to have the courage to go. We trained 6 years. We sailed 3.5 years, 2.5 years. And the difference is, to your question, Elisa, is that it was a voyage to, that he kept saying, you can't protect what you don't understand, and you won't protect it if you don't care. It's about values. And you can't do it by yourself. You need to connect to the earth. The voyage around the world was just to understand and learn and discover the earth. But what we learned is we're in the storm. We're in the storm. We're getting run over every day. People are measuring unprecedented melt of glaciers in Greenland, and children in Majuro are writing poetry for a dying island that's going underwater. We instruct our children in Washington, D.C. to put on their face masks because there's smoke from California. The storms are coming. The pandemic is here, but they're all coming. Who is going to get us out of the storms? We need those to come and light the flame in the black of the storm. And I will argue that the greatest storm that is coming is not in the environment, it's inside of us as people who are continuing to choose what's hurting the earth opposed to what's healing it. And the race is on, the war is on, and it's on. And the worldwide voyage, which triggered why we needed to go on a circumnavigation of the Pacific, is because the worldwide voyage said we met thousands of strangers in the poorest of communities, in the hardest of classrooms. Those in universities are doing what they can with what they have and where they're at. They're not connected, it's disconnected, but every time someone makes an act of kindness in their community, they're no longer doing it for just their community, they're doing it for the earth, they're doing it for the race. And then Lacey keeps making me come back to, and my father, you need to bring him in here, and Mao, and it's all about the teachers. That Hawaii is a place. I sailed around the whole world. And when you look at the place that has the best flame, it's the one I left from. And so I believe the circumnavigation is about a look at oceans, islands, and people. Circumnavigation is about facing the greatest environmental challenge of our time: protect the oceans. It's the engine of climate, it's the engine of life. It defines it's the only thing that can stop the extinction of wildlife. It's the only thing that can stop the changing of the chemistry of our atmosphere. It's the only thing, and it's our home. And the fact that we're going to go to so many islands, there are no better schools on the earth to learn how to live on the island well than Pacific Islanders. And so we need, and in the end, ultimately, it's Lacey's promise is to build the school. The school is what we need to do, because I believe, and I'll end here and I'll be quiet. We're in the most challenging time ever. We're at a time that has the highest and most risk ever. We are in the most extraordinary moment in history where we're going to have to change. The pandemic's helping us understand that. Who is going to do that? I think the greatest generation of navigators on the earth ever in humanity's history is in schools today. They're in a classroom, they're in kindergarten, they're in university. They're those that are not yet born, but are going to be in schools. Our job is change schools. And Hawaii is an agent of that. And so this circumnavigation of the Pacific, it's longer than the worldwide voyage. It's building a third canoe that's virtual, that can be in Greenland in 1 minute, nanosecond, can be in module. It's about bringing capacity around the world, around something that has a movement that's big enough a scale that really creates change. And we're working on it. We're building it. And but I will just end here. The school is in Hawaii. That's my promise. And maybe Lacey made me promise verbally, but that's my promise to my father and my mother and my grandmother and to mom and to everyone. And why Hawaii's children are so lucky, because there is a Walter, there is a Emmett, there is a Larry, there's a governor that understood. And so, yeah, I'm worried, I'm inspired. Tonight was helpful. I get so depressed sometimes that I can't get up. And tonight I'm strengthened by what I heard. And we need to do? We gotta come together. And so what tonight's panel does, it brings us together. It's the first time I've ever seen everybody in the same room. This is crucially important for Hawaii to unite around something that matters and recognizes got Kuleana to the only island we have in space that has life. So why don't we protect it? Because we know how. I don't know what that is, but whatever, it's over.
Thank you, Nano. I'm going to ask all of you, based on everything that we've heard tonight, we have a literal voyage coming up with the next voyage for the Voyaging Society, but all of you here, and as Pomai said, we are all islands unto ourselves. We're all on a voyage right now, and it's one of the most impactful, I think, in time. So as we make our way forward, if you could just share some thoughts about what we should take on that voyage as we go, what we need to be thinking about. Denise, I want to close out with you, because I think the message about children is the one that's most hopeful and forward thinking. But to everybody, as we go on this voyage, or as you're voyaging, what are you taking and what should we be thinking about? If we could start with you, Pomai.
The words that come to mind is hanauho, which means rebirth. I think every time we get back onto the canoe and we actually go the distance, we actually are back in this period of incubation. And it's a period where we're able to recognize all of the things that lay in wait for us when we get back. It also is an opportunity for us to reflect upon the fact that we have all the resources that we need to thrive and survive for a 30-day period, right where we're at, right under our feet. And so I think for this next voyage, what we take with us is knowing that irregardless of where we are, that as important as the honua is under our feet, where we live and where we grow and where we develop and cultivate our families, that when we go to all these places throughout the world, around the Pacific Rim, that those people are in the exact same position that we are, and that we help them and we kako them wherever we go. So that's what I think. Aloha.
Larry?
Boy, I heard from Denise the word mindset from this student who said not just going through some motions, but something that's going to be meaningful in the mind of that child or student for the rest of his or her life. And we have very similar philosophy of Hawaiian education called the Kumuhonua Mauliola. Our word for mindset is Mauli. Mauli is a spirit of life. And we are in this, we have still spirits of life, but of course we're looking at new spirits of life when we're talking about our youth and what we can do to influence that spirit. And in our philosophy, we want to ensure that hopefully that Maoli can be Hawaii, can be Hawaiian. There are many Maoli throughout the world, but our Maoli, as we've been talking, is unique to our place. And we have a special gift from our place. And therefore, I say again, language is crucial in connecting where we left off, in relearning about how we can become stronger for who we are. And we haven't abandoned it. We are pursuing it, and we will continue to do it. And do not underestimate language. It permeates every home, every grandmother and grandfather, parent, child, uncle, auntie, everybody. So it's big. It's not just for a certain kind of program. It's what it's intended to be from the beginning. It's something that nature has given us, and we lived our nature through our language, and this is how we know about our cultural world. And now we need to reconnect to that because we want to share that gift as Hawaiian from Hawaii. And this is one way that we are doing this through this institution. I heard the word school. And of course, we have it from our baby since we started our Punana Leo. We even started our infant toddler Hi'ipepe, and we have it now up to our university. But we can do better, and we are, of course, as we all continue to not give up and continue to do the work. Because every time we reach a goal, there are many more milestones to make. So that's wonderful, and I think that's the name of the game. The more we complete one cycle, there are many more cycles to go. And I said our language lifts us and carries us through that path, to that voyage. So mahalo nui loa for this discussion this evening.
Thank you. Emmett?
Thank you.
Look into the food.
So first of all, aloha aina. Something was resurrected by George, honoring Joseph Navahi and my great-grand-aunt Emma Navahi, and the banner aloha aina that has gone forward throughout the islands and today. I honor that. The second thing is, the most successful thing we've done as an Ohana was a nuclear-free and independent Pacific movement that brought all the indigenous support at ending the RIMPAC exercises at Ko'olawe. But it was the independence movement that really brought us together. And I think that our next step has got to be looking at our independence, however it's going to be portrayed. But that's the generational charge. So we can take care of the land because the land will take care of you. There's no other demanded that we have to believe in. As far as what's happening throughout the Pacific in the next voyage, Iolo Kanaloa, the Maori mandate is that Kanaloa, is it. And hopefully that Hokulea will launch from Ko'olawe. Mahalo.
Thank you for that. Kai'u, your thoughts?
Kako'o, Uncle Emmett. Yeah, I guess what we would carry on this next voyage. The word aloha comes to mind. We all use it so much, but it is so deep and powerful beyond just some things we use it for every day. So yeah, I think just the gratitude of our, the leaders that are here in this panel. Again, the revolutionaries that we have so much to thank for getting us to this point where we're at today, being able to take those lessons from the kupuna that you folks had to bring it to us to learn from them and through you, and then to carry on that legacy that you folks started. Just have lots of aloha for you folks, and all the groups too the people that you're representing, and yeah, continuing to inspire more the younger generations that are going to be able to do even more to help us get to the place we need to be. Mahalo.
Thank you, Ka'u. Bruce, your thoughts?
Oh man, I think I don't know. I mean, I think aloha. If I was going to say, what are we going to take with us? Everything that it embodies. Kindness, courage, doing the right thing. Expansion of awareness and all that stuff. I mean, it's always at the forefront, right? I'm just looking from the lens from the canoe, you start off with an idea, you start off with a destination, and you end up with an expanded understanding that you really didn't even didn't have a clue of what you were really going after, because it was so much greater. So, which is a wonderful thing. So anyway, I'll just leave it at that.
Thank you. Walter, your thoughts?
Yeah, I want to first of all say mahalo to Nainoa. It gave me a really good understanding of what this whole Hokulea thing is all about. I know I told you a story that I went from Maui to Kaho'olawe and I got seasick. And you guys are traveling all over the world, so you know how much I admire what you guys are doing. What I couldn't understand was we're going all over the world telling people about what's happening to our environment and to the whole world. And at the same time, back home, we're losing all of our fish in the ocean, we're losing lands to all kinds of development. And the problems that are happening all over the world is happening right here at home. So my focus has been right here at home. But now I can understand, listening to you, Nainoa, how important it is to also take this message all over the place. And it's a matter of survival. You break down one word of everything that's going on, it's survival. So for us here at home, it's going to have to be unity. It's really, really hard because, prior to this Renaissance thing, we all went to school here, and the schools were teaching us, a lot of bullshit about our history and who we are and what kind of people we are. We had a very low esteem of ourselves. We didn't want to speak the language. We want to change our names from Hawaiian names to Haole names. So we've come a long, long way. And I think it's the unity part that has been escaping us because we are so confused about everything else that's going on around us. So this idea of a school is a good idea. It gives us a place where we can all unify around. And I mentioned earlier that we did what we did because we were listening to the kupuna. We had no University of Hawaii telling us exactly who we were, all of the PhDs coming out because they did studies. And now we know what the truth is. So Hawaii is the pico, right? We're in the center of this vast Pacific Ocean. So we have every right to go outside of the Pico and to spread the word. And while you're sailing around the place, we need to unify ourselves to show everybody with actions at the Pico on how we're going to survive. And that's going to take unity. And I believe that the Hawaiians have that capability. We have that in our blood. We have that in our history. We know all of our ancestors. We know enough to know that they could survive and be resilient. So the last words I want to throw out there is that we have leadership. I've seen the leadership that we have today from the young people. You know, John is going to go home, have some drinks. I'm going to go home, have some drinks. It's the next generation. And I saw that next generation on Mauna Kea. And boy, there is so much hope for the future in Hawaii because I saw with my own eyes young people on barren lava create a community that I was so proud to be a part of. And these were the young people. And the older guys were just sitting there waiting to be arrested so that everybody would wake up and try to survive. So it's these young people who are teaching us that we're not indigenous people to the United States. They're teaching us that our overthrow that was illegal, that there was no treaty, that we are occupied, and that we need to start learning about international laws if we're going to survive. So, yes, we need to spread the word, and yes, we need to survive at the Pico. Mahalo, Nainoa, for your stories.
Thank you, Walter. Governor, your closing thoughts?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you. I mean, I really totally enjoyed this evening. You know, earlier today I was listening to this song, some music by my friend Peter Apo, and he was singing the Song of Sovereignty. And there was a line in there that is just sticking in my mind. And what the line in the song is that every step into the future is a step into the past. And the words are ringing in my mind because what we're discussing tonight, for many of us, was a process of learning, was a process of discovering who we are, discovering our land, discovering things that we didn't necessarily begin with. And I so much enjoyed just listening to the conversation. In my mind, what I could see was a whole lot of heroes, a whole lot of people who began that process. The Kalahiki brothers in Waihole Waikane, Pai Galdera, and people who didn't know anything except they knew the programs weren't working. And all of these things, Pomai's Daddy and I used to run around together. We didn't talk about it. But then all of a sudden he pops up and tells me, I want to build a canoe. You know, and because we have all been learning about who we are, and none of us who get credit for so many things actually deserve not even a tenth of it, because we are actually part of what somebody else built. The 1978 Constitutional Convention was built on the shoulders of people that were not even delegates. Walter talked about how he walked around and getting signatures in his T-shirt, and I almost nobody would. They talked him into wearing slippers. That was about the biggest concession. I mean, other people that names we just forgot. And the process comes to today, and today, one of the most interesting things that I've learned along the way is that Hawaiians have a way of describing, talking about who they are. And they talk about the lahui, they talk about the aupuni. But the phrase that I most found interesting is the concept of kapo'e aloha aina. They call themselves the people who love the land. And the kauna in all of that was that if you turn it around, you get aina aloha kapo'e, the land that loves the people. So what this journey is meant for me and for many of us is learning how to accept the love that Hawaii gives us by providing everything we need if we are willing to accept it and to take it. And the same concept can be done with planet Earth. This place, this land, this everything loves us. It feeds us. It makes us who we are. And the biggest challenge, I think, for the future is going to be making ourselves available to accept that. Anyway, I really enjoyed spending time. I must say one thing, though, about the Renaissance. The one thing I remember most about the Renaissance is no matter in the most trying of moments, what you could hear from the people that were involved was not moaning, it was laughter. Maybe it was because of the pain, but unity and laughter. Walter, you cannot believe. I have to say one quick story. We're in a meeting with the Protect Kaho'olawe Ohana. Everybody's talking about making plans, about doing something. All of a sudden, I look up. I say, Loretta, where's Walter? Oh, he already on the island that you guys planning to go to. So, okay, cousin. Anyway, kapo'e aloha aina.
Thank you, Governor. Nainoa?
Again, always the same. Thank you to all of you. I learned a lot tonight, and I'm strengthened. Lara, you need to help us, because embedded in that language is culture. What the real question about humanity, what is its culture? What is the culture of humanity for the future in the 21st century? What navigates, what values guide that? That's why amongst all the challenges we have in Hawaii, we seem to do the best when we go back to what the governor said, go back to those Hawaiian values, and we'll figure it out. So when Bruce and Kailani say we're going to carry aloha, I understand what they're saying. God. Emmett, thank you for the permission. We don't want to go to Tapu Tapu out there without leaving from Kealei Kahiki. I'm an ignorant historian, but there are people that are uncovering this extraordinary road, the longest of the voyaging deep sea roads, called Kealei Kahiki. Imagine 2,000 years ago, with no map and no nothing, sailing this road back and forth. 2,400 miles. That's like going from San Francisco to Boston. And there's so much to continue to uncover and unravel. And so when you protected Kaho'olawe, you and Walter, you protected that language that's deeper, that talks about what Larry is talking about, and we're still trying to uncover. That's why Renaissance, maybe in some ways, has only begun. And Walter, you strengthen me. You remind me of what it is to take on the challenge, and the notion that I firmly believe too. We got to come together, guys. This cannot end in a HIFF panel. We need to come together and to unify. Because I really believe that that to protect Hawaii, you got to protect the earth, but to protect the earth, you got to protect Hawaii. And if we lose that culture that navigates us, I think it's going to be a great loss to the world. And so, you know, and just say that, you know, what I take is just, I take the promises to my and to many of our teachers, especially the ones that are not in the room today. And there's 100 of them. And I make a promise to children that I don't know outcomes, but we're going to be willing to have the courage to let go of the lines and try to look at unity globally. I don't know who else can do it but Hawaii. And I just think that I have grown to have a very deep love for the island Earth. It's the only one we got. It's infinitely beautiful. Life is extraordinarily complex, and we're changing it. And there's a duty and a responsibility to protect this island that is, you know, it's rotating 1,000 miles an hour. You don't need a seatbelt. It's going around 1.4 million miles around the sun. Tomorrow, it's going towards the constellation Leo at 1 million miles an hour. And it's just an amazing, infinitely amazing home that we need to make promises to. So, aloha to you folks. Thank you. It's been a privilege, but I hope this is not the end, but rather a beginning. Thank you.
Thank you, Nano. Denise, I wanted you to have the last word because you really are there working every day, training new navigators and really spend your time with the ones who give us the most hope. So if you could just bring us home, I'd appreciate that.
I think it's, first of all, when you said I was going last, I'm like, oh no. But thank you very much for allowing me to be here and just allowing me to hear all of these rich stories. I feel the one thing, if we're looking at what we would bring or what I would want to see brought, is I'm reflective just on being a part of this evening. And I feel like being able to capture these stories of hope means that you see the challenge that you had to endure and to overcome in order to get to this place of hope. And I feel like that's what our haumana need, that's what our keiki need, is that they need to see and be a part of and hear and to learn from the challenges so that they can get to the hope, so that they can see how they too will have to persevere, that it's not an easy road, that we are very lucky that the foundation has been laid. But along this journey, to hear more of these stories, more of the challenges and how you have come out on top, and that they too will have to make hard decisions. They too will have to stand up, and that road is not going to be easy, but that kapu aloha, that they will take all that you have lived and learned, and that they too will begin to figure out how to make their way. So I think that's the one thing that I take away from this conversation is hope. And I think that's what, if you're taking on the next journey, is that hope, and being able to share those stories so that our next generation can build on all of the greatness that already has been laid before them, and give them the hope to know that they can persevere and overcome and continue to make things better and stronger for our lahui and our community. But mahalo nui for allowing me just to be a part of this conversation.
Thank you for that. I want to thank all the panelists. It's really been such an honor to be with you and It was wonderful to connect with all of you over these last weeks to put tonight together. So thank you for everything that you've done and for sharing with all of us tonight. I'd like to thank all of the people who have stuck with us through this conversation this evening. And lastly, I'd like to thank our friends at the International Film Festival and Heather Juni and her crew at Ulu Ulu who made all of this happen. I wish everyone well, stay safe, and again, as Nainoa said, this should be a beginning, and I hope to see all of you again. Aloha.
Aloha, Lisa. Thank you.
Aloha.